14 Israelis have been murdered in the most brutal wave of terrorist attacks that Israel has experienced since the end of the Second Intifada in 2005. This time, however, it's Arab Israeli citizens as well as Arab Palestinians who are behind the attacks. This is the Israel Guys.
Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of fake news, you should connect to the true and authentic stories of Israel. Guys, you've heard a lot about the attacks, I'm sure, on the news all over the world is covering what's happening here in Israel. What you probably don't know much about is the actual attackers. Who are they? What's their ideology? What's causing this trouble in the land of Israel? Guys, we're going to get all of that just a moment. Don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe. Go ahead and leave us a comment. Ring that notification bell. Guys, let's be in touch. We want to hear from you, and we want to get this content out to the world. You need to know about what's going on. Guys, before we jump in here to the program, let's see a few of the headlines. What is the world actually saying in regards to these attacks against Israel? Let's run a few headlines.
What you should notice about those headlines is that there's some words, some very particular words that are missing from those. I'll let you guys comment down below what words you think are actually missing. But the words that you're probably seeing there is words like militant or gunman or Palestinian or Arab, and words that might be missing. Well, let us know what you think down in the comments
Luke, how about teenager?
Yeah.
What could be
or
harm?
child is probably words that you're actually seeing.
Or women.
But the biggest thing you should take away from these headlines is that they're trying to place Israelis and Palestinian terrorists, Israeli civilians, Palestinian terrorists on the same level playing field. Guys, quick overview of what's actually happened. I'm sure you've heard a lot of it. Here's a quick rundown of what's happened in the last 3 weeks here in Israel. There have been a lot of terrorist attacks. There have been 4 particular attacks that have claimed the lives of 14 people. Both Jew and Arab, by the way. There was a Christian Arab Israeli policeman that actually died taking out one of the terrorists.
Which that's incredible, Luke. That can't just go on just like over.
Yeah.
You're talking about a Christian Israeli Arab man who stood up to defend the Jewish people.
Chased down the terrorists and ended up getting shot and killed.
Yeah, he's actually protecting and defending. His line of duty. Because there's all this talk right now in the Arab world about. We'll get to that in a little bit about the Arabs actually being a part of the Israeli nation and what's that response? This guy was an incredible man, and he defended the Jewish nation with all that he had. He rose to that occasion of defending the nation with all of his training, and he did it. It cost him his life, but he saved Jewish lives.
Guys, first of all, these are the worst terrorist attacks that have happened since 2005. More than 15 years, and you're talking about the Second Intifada, which is basically an all-out war with radical Islamic jihadism. But these are because 14 people have been killed in a matter of just a couple of weeks. These are the worst attacks that have happened in more than 15 years. A couple of really interesting things that I guarantee you the mainstream media is not reporting is that so there's been 4 terrorists, right? 4 attacks that have claimed 14 lives. 2 of them were Arab Israeli citizens living in Israel, right? 2 of them were Palestinian Arabs from Judea and Samaria that crossed the security barrier, but all of these attacks happened in what we call Israel proper. None of them happened in Gaza, none of them happened in the Sinai, none of them happened in Judea and Samaria. They all happened in Beersheba, Tel Aviv, Hadera, Bnei Brak, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, mostly on Israel's coastline there. So very interesting that these things are happening, not in what they call the occupied West Bank, the occupied or disputed territories, but in Israel proper.
So, Luke, let's ask the question really quick. A lot of people are wanting to come to Israel right now. They're all saying, is it safe? Yeah. And most of the people are asking, can I come into Judea and Samaria, the West Bank area?
That's the only place you should go, actually, right now.
Well, honestly, can I just say this really quick? This is probably one of the safest areas in Israel. This place where they know who the enemy is and they're prepared. And the army and the military are full force here, and even the citizens. It's a very safe place to be. Even all of Israel's a safe place to be. Guys, you hear it. We're going to talk it out. We're going to lay out what's going on with this security barrier, what's going on with the infiltrations into that area. Well, the real fact is that this big fence that runs along it's actually
Josh,
a barrier right in the middle of Israel.
Right, yeah.
Like
I was by the
there's
way,
Israel on both
I was
sides
in
of that
Chicago
fence.
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Statistically, I'd still much rather be here in Israel, Israel proper, or Judea and Samaria than in Chicago.
It all pales.
Statistically, your trip is the most dangerous part is driving to the airport, guys. So come to Israel. Check out our trips. By the way, serveisrael.com. You got to check it out. Josh, because two of the terrorists came through holes in the security barrier on the Green Line separating Judea and Samaria and Israel proper. Guess who exposed those holes in the fence on video about a month and a half ago on YouTube? We documented them. We'll put a link to the video in the description below. You should go watch it. Let's play a quick 10-second clip of that right here. Now, I found a little bit more information about that. Security officials estimate that 50,000 illegal Arab Palestinians cross through these holes, because this is not the section we went to, is not the only one. They run from north to south every single day. 50,000 Palestinian Arabs cross illegally every single day. Most of them are going to work, because we talked to a lot of them. That's what they're doing. A few of them are going to commit terrorist attacks, as we have seen just in the last couple of weeks, that claimed a lot of Israeli lives.
Or smuggle things, or you name it. I mean, there's all kind of illegal. Come on, if you're crossing illegally across a fence that's there to keep you from going, then you're not doing that legally. There's a lot of not just crossings illegal, but what are you bringing? All that is very important to Israel's security.
So, Josh, I must say, we released that video. Terrorists crossed a few weeks later, and now Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz just announced that 300 million shekels have been allocated to fix some of the holes in the security barrier. Until they get it fixed, they're stationing troops all along the security fence. So they're going to fix some of the issues. It's kind of weird that they say some, because like you said, they want to leave a few holes open to just keep that pressure from building up too much. Although you would think at this point they shouldn't be worried about that. They should be worried about saving lives. Another interesting thing that Defense Minister Benny Gantz said, because right now Israel's cracking down very hard on terror, as they should. Unfortunately, Benny Gantz, who's kind of I used to call him center-right. It might be better defined as
I've always called him center-left, and you're just now coming
I don't know. But
Israeli, way to go. He's center-left,
but you got to admit, Israeli politicians, they move. They don't stay.
Yeah. I mean, he's always been pretty
That's
left,
probably all politicians.
Yeah.
I shouldn't just say Israeli. But because, Naftali Bennett used to be a right-wing politician.
Right.
Well, you can't really call him that anymore.
Yeah. Center at best.
But Benny Gantz, defense minister, also announced that they're going to work on issuing tens of thousands of new work permits so that Palestinian Arabs can legally cross into Israel. Right now, 100,000 Palestinians cross every single day into Israel proper legally through the checkpoints. They have permits and everything to go to work every single day. And Benny Gantz just announced they're going to increase that number by tens of thousands. I guess if they figure they're going to try and stop 50,000 from crossing every day, they should probably give them all legal permits.
Right.
And that's going to stop terrorism. So
Luke, I want to talk about why. Why are there people, what is the problem? Because like I just said a minute ago, both sides of that fence are Israel. Let's not get that mixed up. There's 700,000 Jewish people living on this side. We're actually on the Judea, Samaria, West Bank, if you will, sides of the fence. There's 700,000 Jews. So why are we locking in these? And this is the conservative view of the point I'm about to make here.
Right.
There's many other on the leftist side that'll bring a different argument to the table. But why are we locking in these terrorist hubs inside an area that's can fully access? Well, I mean, you could say the little hilltop communities have their own security, but we're pushing these terrorists into a hub where 700,000 Jews live. What are those 700,000 Jews not worth protecting? This is a big question. And is this fence? Is there a bigger issue than the fence? And I think there is certainly a bigger issue than the fence. The bigger issue is, who are these Arab people, are they actually the enemies of Israel? And maybe, okay, we can't just say all Arabs there. Let's say these ideological Arabs that are Islamist, that hate Israel with all they have. They're teaching their children to hate Israel, and they have citizenship in this country. Luke, is that something really crazy about that?
Well,
I mean,
I think,
maybe it's kind of a woke thing that you can hate the country. I mean, we didn't grow up in America like that, but nowadays a lot of people hate America that live there, but they're not going to kill Americans. Literally what we have right now is we have Arabs that live in Israel that are committing acts of terrorism.
Well,
not
you have
just like
probably about 2 million is Arab Israeli citizens, right? You have several million that live in Judea and Samaria, Gaza.
Right.
But there used to be like a difference, and Israel is always very proud of the fact that they're a very democratic country. There's Arabs that sit in the Knesset. Arab Israeli citizens, which I want to be clear, there's a lot of amazing, very Zionistic Arab Israeli citizens.
We just spoke about one that was a police officer that took out
serve in the military. But before the lines were more clear that like if Palestinians in Gaza, Palestinians in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, they're radicalized to Islamic terrorism, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now what we're seeing is that line is very much being blurred, and also the line between their leaders. I want to look at just the leaders' response. If we're talking about leaders of the Palestinian Authority, leaders of Hamas, Fatah, which are the terrorist organizations that are underneath the Palestinian Authority, and obviously Hamas in Gaza Strip, but also Arab leaders in the Knesset. First of all, we have the joint list, the Arab Joint List, which is a big Arab party in the Knesset that's not part of the coalition right now. Ayman Odeh, who, quote, said, throw the weapons in their faces. The forces who are here are humiliating our people, our families, and everyone who comes to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Our historical position is that we will be with our people in order to end the murderous occupation so that the state of Israel will be established and Palestinian flags will be hoisted on the walls of Jerusalem. Notice how he said murderous occupation when his people are the ones murdering Israelis and murdering their own people. Yeah. Now, according to Ayman Odeh, and if we have an update on this and we clarify what really happened, we'll be sure to let you guys know. He said his words were mistranslated when it got translated into Hebrew. Highly doubt that. According to him, what he actually said is, and which is also pretty terrible, by the way, what he actually said was, quote, all I said is that I call on young people not to enlist in the occupation army, which harms and harasses anyone who goes to pray in the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We are not a part, and we must not be a part of the Israeli occupation machine against our deprived Palestinian people who are fighting a just struggle to achieve their freedom and bring the occupation to an end. These things must be natural and clear to all. So to put this in context, you're talking about a senator or a congressman in the United States putting out a public statement. So, and by the way, this is his moderate one this is what he claims to have said. His statement would be like, American citizens, we encourage you not to serve in the American army because the American army is an occupation force against people living in America. That's what he claimed to say, which, if you know anything about Arab leaders making statements, obviously a lot of times they make statements in Arabic and English, sometimes in Hebrew, and usually they say different things in different languages, and a lot of people miss it in translation. So I would not be surprised if he actually said the original statement, and he's just trying to cover up for himself.
Luke, what's the big problem when you have a leader like this stating these kind of things to the people? Well, here's an underlying problem. You have most Arabs in Israel, even if they're Palestinian Arabs or they're Israeli Arabs, they carry, for the most part, I mean, we're just going to put a large lump here. They all carry what? They're Arab. That's actually first and foremost in a majority. They're Arab first, which means they're only in Israel as long as Israel exists, with the hope of one day attaining their own sovereignty. That means destroying the nation of Israel and creating another Arab state right here. So if your last name is Arab and you live in this area, your goal eventually, whenever it happens, you're going to support it. Even if you're a good person, you're Arab, and you would hope that one day you'll attain your national inspirations of statehood. And it doesn't matter if you're Israeli Arab or Palestinian Arab. This is going to be great. You have to support it because you're
Right.
Arab, right? This is a problem. And now we have an Israeli
Except
Arab.
for Zionistic Arabs,
Which
which,
I'm-
also there's Zionistic Arabs that are
that
Palestinian.
are Palestinian. You have them on both
I
sides,
mean,
but
they're
it's
few and
not
far
the majority.
between. Yeah, definitely not the majority. Definitely more amongst Arab Israeli citizens, but still, yeah, it's a culture. What you're talking
Here's
about.
the problem.
and the leadership is
Yeah.
also very much the problem.
The leadership is the key, and that's exactly what I'm going to say, is that we've got these guys like Odeh. He's an MK in the Israeli Knesset, meaning he has people vote for him. He's a part of this democratic state of Israel, and he's saying things like this. And after he says these atrocious words that Luke just mentioned, what happens? Well, the tomb of Joseph in Shechem, in Nablus, is desecrated not just once, but twice. They go in there to this sacred place to everybody in the world that's Jewish, not just here in Israel alone, but to all Jews across the world, hold this place sacred, that their ancestor, Joseph, was buried there. It's a place that you honor and respect. Well, the Arabs come in and they completely disfigured the place, tore it to pieces, broke chandelier. The lighting went down. The electric boxes were crushed in, and the tomb itself was majorly. It's just a big like thing there that's got like tiles over the top of it. Cracked the tiles, broke concrete. I mean, serious damage was done. 2 days in a row, or at least 2 times in the same week. And this is
also then a third time, 2 Jewish guys that tried to go in without IDF coordination were shot.
The
and
2
wounded.
Jewish guys were shot on the way in to help. Yeah, exactly. To try to bring some national. Any Jewish person senses that they have to go in and on behalf of their ancestor Joseph to bring some honor, right? Because this is massively dishonoring to Jewish heritage. So they've gone in. They've done this. Here's what I want to quote: what the Samaria Brigadier General Roy says when he addresses his troops. And this is encouraging to me as a young general here in the IDF. This is what he tells his troops. He says, "Today, we are embarking on an operation to repair the destruction of Joseph's tomb. This is where the land of Israel was promised to our forefather Abraham, and we will act with a heavy hand, not as thieves in the night, but as sons of kings. This is how we will restore the honor of the land and people of Israel." Guys, this is done over a radio to the troops in the field that are about to go in to bring order and to bring protection for those that are going to restore Joseph's tomb. This is the commander. This is what the military of Israel stands for. They're going to go in with a heavy hand. They're saying, no, we're not coming in as thieves. We're going to come in as sons of kings and rule, bring some order to this place and restore what was broken and restore honor back to Joseph, the forefather. This is what happened. And I want to encourage you guys that this is the Israelis that are here. These are the proud Zionists that are here that are going to protect the land of Israel. And we need this kind of guys like Roy to stand up and be these kind of brigadier generals to really fight this battle against the horrible enemy of Islamic jihadists.
Guys, I want to
That's the
tell
battles
you
against.
about the best way to fight radical Islamic jihadist terrorism here in Israel. And that is by planting a tree. Now, you might have heard of a lot of tree planting projects, but you've never heard about one like this. And that is the Greening Israel, Restoring Israel's Biblical Heartland, One Tree at a Time project that we just released this week. This is brand new. You can go to greeningisrael.com to not only plant a tree today, because we're starting fundraising right now. We'll be planting as soon as the Shemitah, the sabbatical, ends here in Israel this fall. But you can also watch the modern, cutting-edge, just fresh off the press documentary film about the struggles that we've had, including experiencing our own terrorism, trees being cut down, fires, property being stolen, documented the whole thing. It's an incredible film, and it's live right now at greeningisrael.com. But you can also plant a tree. Go to greeningisrael.com right now. Guys, this is the best way to fight back. If you're living somewhere in a different part of the world, but you support Israel, you need to fight back and show the radical terrorists that no, they will not win, and they cannot win because you support Israel's right to the entire land of Israel. Go to greeningisrael.com, link in the description below. You can plant a tree and watch the movie today. Go right there and check it out, guys. I want to talk about a couple more responses. One, from the deputy mayor of Nazareth. Nazareth is an Arab Israeli town. You may have heard of it from I don't know, maybe the Bible, but Nazareth. But it's an Arab Israeli town. Everybody's Israeli citizens, but the deputy mayor of Nazareth, Samir Saadi, said there was a IDF went in to apprehend several members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They went into Jenin to arrest a couple of guys. The guy they were trying to arrest opened fire on them. They shot back and ended up killing him. And in response, the deputy mayor of Nazareth said, quote, "Our condolences to the cousins in the Jenin camp." Talking about if you're Arab, you're all one family, right? Quote, "I ask Allah to accept him with the shaheeds, the martyrs." So he considers an Arab Israeli citizen a leader in Israel's government. Deputy mayor of Nazareth said that he's basically considering a terrorist that was killed by the IDF in self-defense as a martyr, okay? Now, I want to talk about just a couple of quotes from inside the Palestinian Authority leadership, okay? Because, first of all, you have Mahmoud Abbas, who is the official chairman of the Palestinian Authority, who put on a pretty nice front. He, tried to make a really not so great, he tried to make a statement that didn't hurt himself too much, but also kind of looked like he was condemning terror, because he said, quote, "Killing Palestinian and Israeli civilians will only lead to an additional deterioration of the situation." And he also went on to talk about how he was also warning people not to incite, so he didn't want to see settlers building and inciting the situation and hurting Palestinians further in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He wanted to keep the status quo. So it was not a condemnation statement at all, but he tried because he's the face, right, of the Palestinian Authority. But while he was, quote, condemning the murders, and this is from Palestinian Media Watch, some of the things I'm quoting right here, everybody underneath him, they didn't have to worry about even trying to condemn the murders. You have Fatah's military wing. So Fatah is the terrorist organization that is under the Palestinian Authority. They're basically, a lot of the terrorists come from Fatah. Their military wing stated, quote, "Hundreds of Jenin refugee camp residents came to the family home of the martyr in a mass procession, while the Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades eulogized Marta Ra'ad and said that he is one of its members." The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade is like Fatah's most violent military wing, okay? Again, terrorist organization. Fatah movement secretary said, quote, "On this blessed day, the first Friday of the month of Ramadan, with the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in the Fatah Jenin branch, accompany to his wedding, one of the Fatah and Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade's leaders in the Jenin refugee camp in Palestine in response to a terrorist being killed." Because, when they're killed, they get to go to heaven and get 72 virgins, so they're accompanying him to his wedding. Again, Palestinian Jenin district governor also praised the attacks. Basically, every Palestinian authority leader didn't have any problem just praising the attacks, praising them all as martyrs, standing with them. They're all one big happy family here. I want to say one quick thing before we wrap up here. Josh, a recent Palestinian survey, and this comes from an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post by Karma Feinstein-Cohen. A new study conducted by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research just before the new wave of terrorist attacks, so before the terrorist attacks started, which claimed the lives of 11. Since then, it's now up to 14 and injured a lot of other people. According to Palestinian Media Watch, when Palestinian respondents were asked about the most effective means of ending the Israeli occupation and building an independent state, 68% chose violence. 44% chose armed struggle, basically engaging in terror similar to the intifadas, right? 24% chose popular resistance, and which is kind of like a euphemism that includes just, random terrorist attacks, right? Like shootings, stabbings, car rammings. But the point is that, basically everybody, it's like a declining scale. Like the worst is all-out violence, and then next it's like armed struggle, and then the most minimum is popular resistance, which is just another name for terrorist attacks. Yeah. Almost all of them are choosing terror and violence against Israel and their struggle against the, quote, occupation in Judea and Samaria. Josh, what's our conclusion, basically, why these terrorist attacks are happening? Obviously, you do want to mention that a lot of these led up to Ramadan. Ramadan, I think, started April 1st, somewhere around the beginning of April. Ramadan's always a violent month. There's always a lot of protests and riots. There's usually violence, but these led up to Ramadan, okay? So that's one thing. And just to clarify, make it really, really clear, out of 4 terrorist attacks in the last few weeks that killed 14 Israeli citizens, both Jew and Arab, by the way, 2 of the terrorists were Palestinian Arabs from Samaria. 2 were Arab Israeli citizens from Israel proper. All of the attacks happened in Israel proper: Beersheba, Tel Aviv, Hadar, Bnei Brak. This is no longer an issue of like occupied territory. It's no longer an issue of West Bank versus the rest of Israel. It's no longer an issue of Palestinian Arab struggle inside Judea and Samaria versus the rest of Israel, full Arab Israeli citizens. The lines have been blurred. It's all an attempt to wipe Israel off the face of the map and to kick Israel into the sea.
Which, Luke, I think is a good thing that now there's no gray. It's black and white. We've got a situation here where now Israel is Israel, and Israelis live in Israel, and it includes Judea and Samaria and the Golan Heights. All these areas are part of Israel, and there's Arabs that live inside of those areas as well as Israel proper. And there's something that now is all of a sudden everybody's realizing that the Arab hostilities are on both sides. And there's a big light bulb going off, and I hope it's going off everywhere, that people could understand this. There's an ideology in the Islamic Arab world that wants to annihilate the people of Israel. We need to say it very bluntly and to the point. Israel's got to be strong. We got to support Israel to be strong and to make the moves that they need to secure their borders. And that's not the border separating Jews. That's the outside border of Israel, protecting them from these hostile Arab nations outside. Guys, we're talking about the Arabs inside. We're not even mentioning the Arabs on the outside. Guys, this is very important for Israel to be strong in its own inside, its own borders, much less outside, and having a strong perimeter around its nation against the. But we got Iran. How many missiles are pointed at Israel? Thousands,
hundreds of thousands,
hundreds of thousands. We've got to have a strong Israel inside so that they can be strong to defend,
guys,
on the outside.
Action point for you is Ramadan doesn't end till the end of April. So there's about 3 more weeks left of Ramadan, which, as we said, is traditionally a time of violence. So now, more than ever, is the time to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the peace of all of Israel, pray for strength. Guys, make sure you subscribe right here on YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, wherever you're catching this on Rumble, whatever it is. Make sure to make a stand against all this radical Islamic terrorism by going to greeningisrael.com and planting a tree today. Make sure you tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the heartland of Israel. We'll be back next week here at the Israel Guys.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you like that content. We can get it to you every week right there at your fingertips. If you really liked it and have questions, anything, we love comments. Go ahead and leave us a comment as well. If you'd like to even go further, your support would be greatly appreciated. We've got lots of content, lots of ideas that we want to keep pushing out there. If you want to support, you can go to our Patreon page or check us out at theisraelguys.com.